The night I found out, I was sitting in the dark. Not the dramatic kind of dark you see in movies. No thunderstorm, no shaking hands clutching a crumpled letter. Just the ordinary dark of a suburban guest room, a lamp I forgot to turn on, and the faint green glow of a small LED blinking on the nightstand. And through a plastic baby monitor the size of my fist, I heard my husband dismantle our marriage in real time. She's stronger than she looks. She'll land on her feet. That was me he was talking about. 18 years, a daughter we raised together, a mortgage we'd finally paid off, a house I had kept standing with both hands every single day, school pickups and parent-teacher nights and grocery runs and the kind of quiet, invisible labor that holds a family together without anyone ever saying thank you. And in the space of one phone call, the kind he thought he was making alone, I learned that while I was downstairs in our kitchen cooking his favorite roast chicken, he was already planning his exit. Calmly, casually, like I was a loose end he was slowly getting around to. I want to tell you the whole story, all of it, because it didn't start that night. It started 6 weeks earlier on a Sunday morning that felt completely, devastatingly ordinary. October, the kind of fall morning that tricks you. Golden light through the kitchen windows, the smell of maple syrup and fresh coffee thick in the air. I stood at the griddle making pancakes, the buttermilk kind, the ones Chloe used to request every birthday when she was small. Daniel sat at the kitchen island in his weekend hoodie, scrolling his phone with that frown. Not an angry frown, a distant one. The kind of expression that means he's somewhere else entirely, even when he's right in front of you. I'd stopped asking where. The answer was always the same, just work stuff. Nothing exciting. Chloe padded in at 8:15, 16 years old and armored in oversized headphones, and the particular skepticism of teenage girls who have quietly absorbed more of their parents' tension than anyone wants to admit. She grabbed an apple off the counter, mumbled something about volleyball practice, and disappeared back upstairs without sitting down. The silence she left behind pressed against my chest. I set a plate in front of Daniel anyway. "We should go to the reunion next weekend," I said. Careful, keeping my voice light. "Might be good for us. Get out of the house, see people." He nodded, chewing, already somewhere else. "Yeah, Rebecca's helping organize. Should be fun catching up with everyone." Rebecca. I kept my face still, kept slicing strawberries, hands perfectly steady. Rebecca Holt, his college girlfriend, the one who, as the story always went, told at dinner parties with a self-deprecating laugh, got away before I came along, before he came to his senses, before us. "She's doing well then?" I said. Easy, curious, the way you'd ask about anyone. "Marketing consultant now, tough divorce, but she's bouncing back. You know how she is." "You know how she is?" I didn't, but apparently he did. He shrugged, eyes already drifting back to the screen. The ease in his voice stayed with me long after I cleared the plates. Not guilt, not hesitation, just ease. The casual warmth of someone who's been talking to a person long enough that talking about them feels natural. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. Outside the window, the October leaves were at their peak, gold and copper and deep rust, still clinging to the branches. Beautiful, right before they fall. I didn't know yet that I was watching the same thing happen to my marriage. My name is Lauren. I'm 42 years old. I lived in a 4-bedroom colonial outside of Columbus, Ohio, in the kind of neighborhood where everyone waves and nobody talks, the kind of place where the cracks in a marriage stay hidden behind freshly painted shutters and good landscaping. I met Daniel Hayes at a college mixer 21 years ago. He was the kind of man who listened when you talked, really listened, eyes on yours, like what you said mattered. I fell in love with that quality first, before the sharp humor, before the broad shoulders, before any of the rest of it. We got married at 24, had Chloe at 26, moved to Columbus for his job at a mid-sized tech firm when Chloe was 3, and I packed away my half-finished master's degree with the intention of returning to it when the timing was right. The timing was never right. I became a substitute teacher at the local high school. I told myself it was flexible, practical, temporary. I told myself a lot of things. By October of last year, I was measuring my worth in small rituals. The lunches I packed, the the fridge I kept stocked, the way Daniel's work shirts were always pressed and hanging in the exact order he preferred. I had optimized myself into a function, a role, a household operating system that ran quietly and reliably in the background. And like any operating system nobody pays attention to, I had become invisible. Nina, my closest friend since our kids were in preschool together, had seen it before I did. We met at the cafe on Broadmoor 2 weeks before the reunion, our usual corner table by the window. She wrapped her hands around her mug the way she does when she's about to say something she's rehearsed. "The quiet ones are the ones that crack you," she said. "Not the loud fights, the silence. We're fine." I stirred sugar into my latte. "Everyone goes through phases." She looked at me the way only someone who's known you for 12 years can look at you. Not pitying, just honest. "Lauren, when's the last time he asked you how your day was?" I opened my mouth. I closed it. The cafe hummed around us, warm and ordinary. Outside, leaves lifted off the sidewalk in small spirals. I drove home telling myself Nina was projecting, that her own divorce 3 years ago had made her see fault lines everywhere, that Daniel and I were simply in a quiet season. Every long marriage had them. I believed it, or I told myself I did. And then the reunion happened and the quiet season ended, violently, abruptly, permanently, like a branch that had been bending for months finally snapping clean in two. The ballroom of the Hilton Easton was lit with string lights and the particular energy of people trying hard to look like they hadn't aged. Middle-aged professionals in their best casual blazers, trading promotions and college-bound kid stories over catered chicken and cash bar wine. The air was thick with perfume and nostalgia and the specific anxiety of people measuring their lives against the lives they'd imagined at 22. I stood beside Daniel in the emerald green dress I'd owned for 7 years and still fit. One of those small, private victories I'd stopped mentioning because nobody asked. A glass of Chardonnay, cool in my hand, smiling until my cheeks ached. Daniel looked different that night, sharper, straighter in the shoulders. His button-down was pressed with unusual care, his eyes carrying an alertness I hadn't seen in months. He laughed easily with old classmates, his hand resting briefly on my lower back, a gesture that felt performed rather than felt. For a moment I let myself believe it, that this was the shake-up we needed, that the reunion had dusted something off in him that had gone stale. Then Rebecca Holt walked in. She moved through the crowd with the kind of unhurried confidence that takes years to earn. Dark hair in loose waves, a tailored camel blazer, heels that were elegant rather than trying. At 44, she'd turned whatever her divorce had cost her into something that looked like authority. When her eyes landed on Daniel, her face changed. Not flirtatiously, worse than that. Warmly, the way your face changes when you see someone who already knows you. "Daniel Hayes." Her voice cut through the room like a song lyric you haven't heard in years but still know all the words to. "You have not aged a single day." They hugged, right there in front of me. The kind of hug that's a beat too long. Not scandalous, not explainable, just a beat too long. Her hand rested on his forearm as she pulled back, laughing. Some shared memory I wasn't in. I extended my hand. "Lauren, so nice to finally meet you properly." Lauren, of course. Her grip was warm, firm, her smile entirely genuine. "Daniel's mentioned you over the years. You two always seemed so solid." "Over the years, 18 years and counting," Daniel said, rubbing the back of his neck. That particular gesture, the one he makes when he's deflecting. The rest of the evening blurred. I circulated, made conversation about school districts and the cost of groceries, laughed at the right moments, competent, composed. The household operating system, fully functional at a party. Across the room, Daniel and Rebecca drifted toward the bar with a cluster of old friends. I watched. I couldn't help it. The way he leaned in when she talked, the way his laugh came out unguarded, the laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months. It landed in my chest like something cold. The drive home was quiet in the particular way of two people not saying the thing they're both thinking. Daniel tapped the steering wheel lightly to the radio. "Good night, nice to see everyone." "Rebecca seems wonderful," I said. Careful. "She's handling the divorce well. Strong woman." He glanced over. "You two seem to get along." We hadn't spoken more than 3 sentences. "Sure," I said. Back home, the house was empty. Chloe had a sleepover. Daniel pulled me close in the hallway, his kiss urgent in a way that felt borrowed, like he was running on someone else's electricity. I responded, my hands remembering the shape of him, but my mind stayed exactly where it had been all night. Rebecca's hand on his arm. The way he laughed. The way he looked awake. I lay beside him that night, listening to his breathing deepen and slow. The baby monitor sat on the dresser, its green light steady. We kept it charged for Chloe's anxious nights. Even at 16, sometimes she needed to know we could hear her. I stared at the ceiling. "Old friends," he'd said. "It's nice to remember when things felt simpler." Simpler. The words sat in the dark with me like a stone. The weeks that followed had a specific texture I can only describe as the feeling of watching something happen in slow motion and being unable to stop it. Daniel's work dinners stretched later, his phone always screened down on the table, texts arriving during family dinners that he silenced with a quick practiced gesture, client in a different time zone. He began showering the moment he walked in the door, not unusual for a man who'd been in meetings all day. Except that now I noticed the scent he was washing off. Light, floral, not mine. One afternoon, I was chopping vegetables for stir-fry, sharp scent of ginger and garlic in the air, when his phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at it before I could decide not to. Last night was everything. "When can I see you again?" No name, just a number with a Columbus area code. I set the phone back exactly as I'd found it, cool marble under my fingers, stood very still at the counter. My pulse was so loud I could hear it. That evening, I cooked the stir-fry anyway. We ate at the table with Chloe, and Daniel told a story about a frustrating client that made her laugh. He reached across and squeezed my hand. Warm, familiar. I squeezed back, and hated myself for wanting to believe it was still enough. Then Nina called. It was a Thursday afternoon, gray and drizzling, and I was folding laundry in the guest room when my phone lit up on the bed. "I need to tell you something," she said. No greeting. "And I need you to not panic." Rebecca Holt had sent her a direct message. Nina and Rebecca had been connected through mutual college contacts, the same sprawling web that the reunion had reactivated. The message was careful, hesitant, apologetic. Nina read it to me word by word. "I'm sorry to reach out like this. I don't know how much you know or if Lauren knows anything, but I think she needs to." He told me their marriage had been over for years, that she'd already emotionally checked out, that they were staying together for their daughter, but living like roommates. I believed him. I shouldn't have. I think he told us both what we needed to hear to get what he wanted. I sat down on the edge of the guest bed. The laundry sat half-folded beside me. Outside, rain tapped against the window. Rebecca Holt wasn't a predator. She wasn't a woman who knew and didn't care. She was another person Daniel had lied to. He hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been running 2 entirely different versions of his life, one for each of us. And neither version was true. I held the phone in my lap for a long time after Nina stopped talking. The green light on the baby monitor blinked across the room. Steady, patient. One day at a time, I thought. First, I need to know everything. I planned it over 3 days. I didn't rush. Rushing would have made it messy, emotional, easy to deflect. I needed precision. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I said a single word. Friday, Chloe had a sleepover at her friend Jess's house, already arranged, calendar confirmed. The house would be ours alone. I placed the baby monitor transmitter in the living room Thursday night, tucked beside the bookshelf under the pretense of checking the batteries. I tested the range from the guest room. Clear signal, good volume. I waited. Daniel came home Friday at 6:15, loosening his tie, carrying the particular exhaustion of a man with too many secrets. We ate dinner, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, a glass of wine each. The conversation stayed surface level. Chloe's college applications, a project at his office, whether we should repaint the front door. Ordinary, careful, like 2 people performing normalcy for an audience of 1. After dinner, I set down my fork. "I've been feeling invisible, Daniel." Measured. No accusation in my voice, just honesty, plain and flat. "Like we're roommates sharing a schedule. I need you to talk to me. His eyes went guarded instantly. "Sarah, Lauren, not tonight. It's been a long week. I'm handling a lot." Handling a lot. That phrase again. Handling what exactly? Because whatever it is, it doesn't seem to include us. This isn't the night for this conversation. He stood, picked up his plate. I stood too. Then maybe I need some air. My voice rose, controlled but sharp. "Don't follow me." I grabbed my coat, slammed the front door hard enough for the sound to travel through every room in the house. I drove around the block, killed the engine in the shadow at the corner of our cul-de-sac, counted to 90. Then I came back through the garage door I'd left unlocked, heart hammering, hands steady. I crept upstairs to the guest room, left the door slightly ajar, picked up the monitor receiver, turned the volume low, and sat on the edge of the bed, and waited. 2 minutes, maybe 3. I heard his footsteps cross the living room floor, the familiar creak of the third board, the one we'd always meant to fix, and never did. Then the shuffle of him settling onto the couch. Then his voice, low and warm, the way it used to sound when he talked to me in the early years, in the small hours, when the world was quiet, and it was just the two of us. "Hey, it's me." A pause. Someone answering. She stormed out, finally. I needed breathing room, honestly. I pressed my hand over my mouth. "I can't keep doing this, Beck. The whole thing is exhausting. Lauren's been checked out for years. She's all about Chloe, the house, the schedule. There's nothing left for us anymore. She doesn't even see me." Another pause, her voice faintly, through his speaker. I couldn't make out words, only the warm murmur of someone who had been waiting to be called. Last night reminded me what it feels like, to actually be wanted, not needed, not managed, wanted. My chest tightened. I've been thinking, Chloe's 16, she's practically grown. She can handle this, kids adapt. I closed my eyes. And Lauren, she's stronger than she looks. She'll land on her feet. She always does. He paused, listening. Then, quietly, with a certainty that landed like ice water, I looked at a few neighborhoods in Clintonville. Good schools, in case Chloe wants to stay near us. Decent commute for you from the east side. I think it could work. I stopped breathing. He wasn't describing a mistake. He wasn't describing a man who'd stumbled into something and didn't know how to get out. He was describing a plan. He had looked at neighborhoods. He knew her commute. He had thought about where Chloe would go to school when this was over. He had done the math on our family's collapse and decided the numbers worked out. Rebecca's voice came through more clearly for a moment, warm with something I could only describe as relief. "I've been waiting for this, Daniel. No more half measures. I want the real version of you." "Soon," he said. "Soon." The call ended. I heard him walk to the kitchen, the refrigerator opening, the pop and hiss of a beer bottle, then the television, sports highlights, the distant roar of a crowd, the most ordinary sounds in the world. I sat in the dark of the guest room for a long time. The monitor blinked its steady green. My face was wet. I hadn't noticed myself crying. I wiped my face, breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth, the way the therapist I'd start seeing 2 weeks later would eventually teach me, except I was already doing it by instinct. The body knows things before the mind catches up. I stood up, walked down the stairs. Daniel startled when I came around the corner, beer in hand, feet on the coffee table, the television painting blue light across his face. "Lauren, I thought you left." I heard everything. The 3 words hung in the room like smoke. He set the bottle down slowly. The color went out of his face the way color goes out of a room when a cloud crosses the sun. Fast. Completely. "What do you—" "The baby monitor, Daniel." I crossed my arms, kept my voice flat. "Your call with Rebecca. The Clintonville neighborhoods. All of it." He stood, ran a hand through his hair, the rehearsed version of a man who needs a moment to think. "Lauren, let me—" "Don't." My voice was quiet. Quieter than I expected. "Don't tell me it's not what it sounds like. Don't tell me it got out of hand. I heard the plan." He exhaled. Long, slow. The exhale of someone who has been carrying a secret and can finally stop holding it. "I was going to tell you." He sat back down, elbows on his knees. The posture of a man trying to look smaller. "I was looking for the right time." "You were looking at houses." Silence. "You told her our marriage had been over for years." I stepped closer. You told her I'd already checked out, that I was more mom than wife, that Chloe was old enough to handle it. He looked up. Isn't some of that true? The question landed like a slap. I didn't flinch. No, I said. None of that is true. What's true is that you stopped showing up, and I kept the lights on anyway. What's true is that I carried this family. Every appointment, every late night, every quiet moment of doing the invisible work, while you were checking out and calling it my fault. I felt invisible too. His voice cracked. Genuine now, or as genuine as anything he said could feel at this point. The pressure at work, turning 45, feeling like this was just all there is. Rebecca listened. She didn't make me feel like a paycheck. You felt like a paycheck. I repeated it slowly. Let it sit. Daniel, I gave up my graduate degree. I took the sub-teaching job so our schedule would work. I reorganized my entire life around yours and Chloe's, and you felt like a paycheck. That's not... I felt invisible too. My throat tightened. I pushed through it. The difference is, I didn't go find someone to replace you with. I stayed. I tried. I asked you to talk to me 100 times and you said we were fine. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. I love you, he said. This was a mistake. A midlife, stupid, selfish mistake. We can do counseling. We can fix this. I looked at the family photos lining the wall behind him. Chloe at 6 in a yellow raincoat. Our trip to the Smoky Mountains the year she turned 12. Our wedding photo, the two of us laughing at something just outside the frame. You already looked at houses, I said. You told her Chloe would adapt. You described a timeline. That's not a mistake, Daniel. That's a decision. He opened his mouth, closed it. The clock on the mantel ticked in the silence. I need you to leave tonight. Steady, final. Pack what you need for a few days. Chloe doesn't need to come home to this. He left 40 minutes later, a bag over his shoulder, his keys in his hand. He paused in the doorway and looked back at me with an expression I didn't have a name for. Not quite regret, not quite relief. Something caught in between. The door closed behind him with a soft, definitive click. I stood in the empty living room. The baby monitor sat on the side table, its green light still blinking. Faithful, steady. I sat down on the couch and let the quiet take me. I slept badly, if you could call it sleep. More like drifting in and out of a gray current. The house making its familiar sounds around me, the radiator ticking, the wind pressing at the eaves. I was still on the couch when the first pale light came through the curtains. I made coffee. Strong. Sat at the kitchen table in yesterday's clothes and watched the morning assemble itself outside the window. At 8:47, my phone lit up. An unknown number. Columbus area code. I almost didn't answer. Hi, Lauren. I know this is strange. This is Rebecca Holt. Nina gave me your number. I wouldn't reach out if I didn't think it mattered. I'm so sorry for what he did to you, and I need you to know. He told me you two had been separated in every way that counted, that you were just waiting for Chloe to finish high school. I didn't know you were home. I didn't know you were still trying. He gave me a completely different picture. I'm not asking for anything. I just didn't want you to think I knew and didn't care. I did not know. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down on the table and stared at it for a long moment. Rebecca Holt, the woman I had spent 6 weeks constructing into a villain in my head, had been handed a different lie. Daniel hadn't chosen her over me. He had chosen a version of his life where the inconvenient truths about both of us had been quietly edited out. He told me she was a woman in crisis, bouncing back, just a friend. He told her I was a marriage that had already ended. He'd built a world in which nobody was being hurt because the people who would be hurt simply didn't know. The precision of it was breathtaking. I texted back 2 words. Thank you. Then I called Nina. Telling Chloe was the hardest thing I have ever done. She came home from Jess's house Saturday afternoon carrying her overnight bag and smelling of strawberry shampoo, and she knew the moment she walked through the door. The way children always know when a room has changed while they were gone. She sat at the kitchen table, the table where we'd had 1,000 ordinary dinners, and I sat across from her, and I told her as much of the truth as she needed to hear. Dad made a serious mistake. We're not okay right now. He's not staying here while we figure things out. Her face went very still, then very young. "Is it Rebecca from the reunion?" She had noticed. Of course she had. "Yes, honey." Her eyes filled. One tear, then two, tracking down her face in silence. She pressed her lips together the way she does when she's trying not to fall apart, and I recognized the gesture because she learned it from me. Then she stood up and walked around the table and folded herself into me, her head on my shoulder, her arms around my middle, and I held her in the kitchen where I had made her 10,000 breakfasts and felt the full weight of what had been taken from us. "I love you both," she said, muffled against my shoulder. "But don't make me pick sides." "Never," I said. "That is never going to happen." She nodded against me. We stayed like that for a long time. The weeks that followed had their own particular kind of grief. Not the sharp, dramatic grief of the first night, the kind that's almost cinematic in its clarity. The slow, gray kind, the kind that ambushes you in the cereal aisle when you reach for the brand he liked, or at 6 p.m. when the house is quiet in a way it never used to be. I scheduled my first therapy appointment on a Monday morning, sitting at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee and the kind of matter-of-fact resolve that comes from having no other reasonable option. The therapist's name was Dr. Kwan. Her office smelled of chamomile and old books, and she had the specific gift of asking the questions you didn't know you needed to answer. In our third session, she said, "When did you last do something because you wanted to, not because it kept the household running?" I sat with that question for a while. I couldn't answer it. That week, I accepted a full-time teaching position at Roosevelt High School that I'd been putting off applying for. English literature, 11th grade. The kind of job that required me to have opinions and voice them out loud to rooms full of people who would push back. It turned out I was good at it. I had forgotten I was good at things. Daniel's attempts at reconciliation arrived in predictable waves. First, the texts. Sincere, careful. The language of a man who had consulted Google on how to apologize. Then flowers, left on the front porch. Roses the first time, sunflowers the second, as if escalating the species might help. Then showing up to Chloe's volleyball matches, hovering at the edge of the bleachers with the look of a man serving a sentence he considered unjust. He called once and said, voice rough and real, "I was lost, Lauren. The midlife thing is a cliche, and I know it. But I was genuinely lost, and I took a wrong turn that I can't take back. I see that now. I see what I risked." I believed him. I think he meant it in that moment. But meaning something in a moment and having it be enough are two entirely different things. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. Not out of bitterness, not out of punishment. Because the door no longer leads where it once did. Rebecca faded from the picture faster than I expected. I heard through Nina, who heard through the reunion network that had apparently become the most active communication channel in our social world, that Rebecca had returned to Cincinnati where her sister lived, that she'd taken on a new client in a different industry, something that required travel, that she was moving forward. Part of me felt a strange kind of relief. Another part of me recognized the sound of someone walking away from a story that turned out to have more pages than they'd signed up for. The fantasy of Daniel Hayes, the one he'd constructed for her, the version unencumbered by mortgages and school pickups and the accumulated weight of real life, had dissolved the moment the real version became visible. There was nothing between them to sustain. There never had been. Only the stories we tell about who we were before we became who we are. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell the week before Thanksgiving, soft and dense, covering the yard in a silence that felt almost kind. Chloe and I baked my mother's cinnamon rolls on Thanksgiving morning, the two of us flour-dusted at the kitchen counter with holiday music playing too loud from her phone. She made us matching ridiculous aprons out of dish towels, and I laughed so hard I cried a little, and neither of us acknowledged the reason my eyes were wet. We drove to my sister's house in Worthington for dinner, a table full of people who loved us. Chloe fell asleep in the car on the way home, curled against the window, and I drove through snow-quiet streets thinking, this is still a life. This is still worth something. By January, I had begun to feel the shape of my own days again. Not the hollow structure of a schedule, the actual felt sense of my life, its particular textures and desires, and small pleasures that I had stopped noticing somewhere in the middle of being someone else's constant support system. I bought good coffee and took the time to make it well in the mornings, standing at the kitchen window, watching the snow in the yard. I called my mother more often. I started reading again, novels, not lesson plans. I went on 2 cautious, low-stakes dates in February. Nothing caught fire, but each conversation reminded me that I existed to people who didn't already have a fixed idea of who I was. That alone was worth something. Spring arrived the way it always does in Ohio, grudgingly, then all at once. Snow gone overnight, daffodils in the front yard by mid-March, yellow and absurdly hopeful, the air carrying that particular green smell of things beginning again. One Saturday afternoon in April, Chloe and I went back to the park, the one where we used to go as a family when she was small, the swings and the wide-open field and the path through the trees that we always meant to follow all the way to the creek. We followed it this time, all the way to the creek. Chloe found a flat stone and skipped it across the water. 4 skips, which she claimed was a personal record. I found one and threw it directly into the bank. She laughed at me. I laughed too. On the way back, I spotted Daniel on a bench near the parking lot. He hadn't seen us yet. He was sitting quietly, hands in his jacket pockets, watching a father push a toddler on the swings. Then he looked up. Our eyes met. He offered a small, careful nod. No wave, no step toward us, just a nod, the kind that means I see you. I'm glad you're okay. I know I don't get to be the one who says that anymore. I held his gaze for a moment. Then I looked away. Not with anger, not with satisfaction or grief or the particular electricity of unfinished things, just with the clear, clean feeling of a chapter ending. Not with fireworks, not with a speech, not with the right words finally arriving. Just with 2 people on a mild April afternoon, each turning back to their separate lives. Some things end quietly. The quietest endings are often the most final. Looking back now, from a distance I still can't quite measure, I see something I couldn't have seen in the middle of it. The baby monitor didn't just catch a betrayal. It woke me up. Not to Daniel's affair. As painful as that was, affairs are at least legible. Legible pain has an address. You know where to direct the grief. What it woke me up to was something older and quieter than that. The way I had made myself small, one accommodation at a time, so gradually I hadn't noticed the shrinking. The way I had turned my own needs into background noise. The way I had poured everything into a family and called it purpose, when part of it was just fear. Fear of the empty space that would exist if I stopped. Marriage requires 2 people tending the fire. When one stops, the embers cool. I don't regret the years. I can't. They gave me Chloe, who is the clearest and most stubborn and most compassionate person I know. They gave me the particular kind of knowledge that only comes from having loved someone for a long time, even imperfectly, even badly, toward the end. But I am grateful, genuinely and specifically grateful for what came after. For the mornings with good coffee and no one else's schedule to hold. For the classroom and the 11th graders who argue with me about The Great Gatsby like it personally offends them. For the slow, deliberate work of learning to hear my own voice again after years of speaking only in logistics. For the knowledge, hard-won, that the hardest doors we close can lead to the clearest paths forward. If you're listening to this and something in it felt familiar, the growing distance, the quiet cracks, the feeling of going through motions in a life that was supposed to be more than this, I want you to know you're not imagining it. Talk to someone. Talk to each other if there's still something there worth reaching for, and if there isn't, if the thing you're protecting is the memory of what it was rather than the reality of what it is, let yourself know that too. You deserve a life you can feel, not just maintain. Here's what I want to ask you directly before you go. Have you ever been in a relationship or a marriage where you realized you'd slowly disappeared inside it? Where you were holding everything together and nobody was holding you? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're in that quiet season right now, the one that feels like distance but you don't know what to call it, What's stopping you from having the real conversation? Hit subscribe so you're here for the next one. These stories are for people who are done pretending everything is fine, and I'm not going anywhere.